Earl Van Dorn did not come to Pea Ridge to win a skirmish. He came to recover Missouri. His plan was bold: march around Samuel Curtis, strike the Union Army from behind, cut its supply line, and open the road back toward St. Louis. For a moment, it looked possible. Confederate troops hit near Elkhorn Tavern. Union soldiers were driven back. Telegraph Road was threatened. By nightfall on March 7, 1862, the Confederates held key ground behind the Union Army. But Van Dorn's plan had a hidden cost. His army was split by Pea Ridge. His supply trains were far behind, and on the other side of the battlefield, near Leetown, Confederate command was falling apart one general at a time. The next morning, Curtis brought his army together, lined up his artillery, and changed the future of the Trans-Mississippi War. Wilson's Creek had shown that Missouri would be fought over. It did not deliver Missouri to the Confederacy. Through late 1861 and early 1862, Union forces pushed Sterling Price south and west. By the time Samuel R. Curtis drove into northwest Arkansas, the Confederate hope of taking Missouri had not disappeared, but it had been shoved toward the border. Pea Ridge sits in that context. This was not just an Arkansas battle. It was a fight over whether Confederate forces could reverse the Union grip on Missouri. The National Park Service calls Pea Ridge the battle that saved Missouri for the Union. More than 23,000 soldiers fought there on March 7th and 8th, 1862. National Park Service also describes it as the most pivotal Civil War battle west of the Mississippi River. That is the scale. In the east, newspapers watched Virginia. In the west, Fort Henry and Fort Donelson had just cracked open Tennessee. But beyond the Mississippi, the question was still Missouri. Could the Confederacy take it back? Earl Van Dorn believed in movement. He wanted to destroy Curtis, recover Missouri, and threaten St. Louis. American Battlefield Trust quotes his ambition plainly: "I must have St. Louis, then huzzah." Curtis had positioned his Army of the Southwest near Little Sugar Creek. Rather than attack that defensive front head-on, Van Dorn planned to march around the Union right, get into Curtis's rear, and strike near Elkhorn Tavern. It was a dangerous idea, but not a foolish one. If it worked, Curtis would have enemies behind him and his supply line threatened. The Union Army might be forced to fight with its front reversed, under pressure, and away from the position it had prepared. But Van Dorn had to move fast. The terrain was rough, snow and cold battered the columns. Men and animals were exhausted, and in order to gain speed, Van Dorn ordered his supply trains far to the rear. That decision would come back on March 8th. Van Dorn's army did not arrive as one solid fist. Pea Ridge split it. One wing, under Ben McCulloch, moved toward the Leetown side. The other, with Sterling Price and Van Dorn, moved toward Elkhorn Tavern and Telegraph Road. This mattered because the two Confederate wings could not easily support each other. Curtis didn't know every detail at once, but Union scouts and movements detected the threat. Instead of sitting still on Little Sugar Creek, Curtis turned north to meet it. On March 7th, the fight opened in two places. At Elkhorn Tavern, Price and Van Dorn pressed the Union line. At Leetown, McCulloch's wing moved into a fight that looked promising at first and then collapsed with brutal speed. Near Leetown, the Confederates had numbers and momentum, but in the woods and fields west of Pea Ridge, command can vanish faster than courage. Federal cavalry under Cyrus Bussey bought time. Peter Osterhaus brought up infantry. Then Ben McCulloch rode forward to reconnoiter the Union position. He was killed. James McIntosh, next in command, was killed soon afterward. Louis Hebert led a large attack, but he did not know the full command situation. He pushed into dense woods, became separated, and was captured. In a few hours, the Confederate right wing had lost its 1st, 2nd, and then effective next field commander. The men were still there. The numbers were still there. But command had been hollowed out. Albert Pike's native troops also fought near Foster's farm and captured guns with other Confederate cavalry. Their presence matters because Pea Ridge was one of the first sizable Civil War battles involving American Indian troops outside Indian Territory. It also created controversy. Oklahoma Historical Society and American Battlefield Trust. Both record reports of scalping and mutilation around Foster's farm. This episode should be handled with restraint. A real and sourced event, not spectacle. The military point is clear. McCulloch's wing could not sustain the attack. While Leetown was falling into confusion, Price and Van Dorn drove hard near Elkhorn Tavern. Union troops under Eugene Carr fought stubbornly, but they were under severe pressure. Confederate attacks pushed the Federals back. By evening, Van Dorn's men held Elkhorn Tavern and Telegraph Road. That looked like success. And tactically, on that part of the field, it was. But the larger battle was not decided by who held the tavern at sunset. It was decided by what each army could do the next morning. Van Dorn had gained ground, but his army was divided, tired, and running short of ammunition. His supply train was not where he needed it. Curtis had been hit hard, but he still had what Van Dorn increasingly lacked: a force he could consolidate, and artillery he could use. The night of March 7th was the hinge. Curtis did not panic because the Confederates were behind him. He turned the problem into a new front. He brought his army together south of Elkhorn Tavern. Units that had fought near Leetown could now be aligned with the rest of the Union force. The Union Army, battered but coherent, prepared to attack north. Van Dorn had the opposite problem. His battlefield success had not solved his supply problem. His wings were not functioning as one army. His ammunition was low. His artillery support was not enough for the morning fight. So on March 8th, the battle changed shape. Curtis opened with artillery. American Battlefield Trust describes the March 8 bombardment as furious and devastating to the Southern line. The National Park Service battle detail says Curtis, having regrouped and consolidated his army, counterattacked near the tavern and successfully employed his artillery to force the rebels back. Then came the infantry. Franz Sigel's troops drove against the Confederate right. Jefferson C. Davis attacked the center. The Confederate line, already short of ammunition and support, could not hold. Van Dorn withdrew toward the Huntsville Road. The army escaped, but the battlefield was lost. Pea Ridge did not end fighting west of the Mississippi. No single battle did that, but it decided the immediate question of Missouri. National Park Service states that the Union controlled Missouri for the next 2 years after Pea Ridge. American Battlefield Trust says the victory solidified federal control over Missouri for the same period. Encyclopedia of Arkansas says the battle helped preserve Missouri's loyal state status and opened Arkansas to Union occupation. That is the strategic meaning. Van Dorn had tried to turn a flank and recover a state. Instead, he lost the field in Arkansas and gave the Union a stronger hold on Missouri. At Pea Ridge, the Confederacy's trans-Mississippi hopes did not disappear forever, but they lost their best early chance. Pea Ridge is a battle about the difference between a bold plan and an executable plan. Van Dorn's idea was aggressive. It could have worked if speed, coordination, command, and supply had all held together. They did not. The march exhausted the men. The supply trains lagged. Pea Ridge divided the army. Leetown killed the command structure. Elkhorn Tavern produced a tactical gain that could not survive the next morning. Curtis did not win by avoiding danger. He won by refusing to let the Confederate rear attack become panic. He turned around, consolidated, and used his artillery at the point that mattered. That is why Pea Ridge belongs in the main Civil War sequence. It kept Missouri in Union hands, and it proved that west of the Mississippi, geography and logistics could be as deadly as bullets. Fort Donelson opened the Cumberland. Pea Ridge held Missouri. Together they show the Western War widening in early 1862. Rivers, roads, mountain marches, border states, and armies fighting far from the spotlight of Virginia. Next, in Civil War daily battles, Hampton Roads, where the age of wooden navies meets iron.